Well, hey, welcome to Let's Sit With This. I'm Kristen Calloway, a licensed therapist, and this is a place where we talk about hard things in a way that actually makes sense. More like chatting around a campfire than sitting in a therapist's office. Here, we talk about getting through hard moments, healing old hurt, and growing into someone that you're proud of. So pull up a chair, get comfy, and let's sit with this together. Well, hello. Welcome to the Therapist Bookshelf Book Club. This really is the best kind of book club because we can meet whenever you're ready. No scheduling, no pressure, just reading and reflecting or learning about the book whenever it works for you. All right, let's talk about February's book for the Therapist Bookshelf. If this is your first time listening to this series, welcome. Each month, I pick a book from my therapist to be read list and share my thoughts with you. Nothing about this is sponsored or influenced by the authors I chose in any way. I highly doubt any of them know that I'm doing this. These are just books that I genuinely believe and hope will help me grow as a therapist and hopefully help my clients too. In this month, we read How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. Now, I picked this book because I've followed Casey on social media for quite a while now. I started following her during the 2020 shutdown during the pandemic. I've always appreciated how she talks about cleaning and organizing through a lens of self-compassion instead of shame. And on her social media platform, she was often sharing what her house looked like in real time with little kids. And that was really comforting and encouraging compared to how social media can make us think how most people live. So I was genuinely curious what that would look like in a full book. I really enjoyed this book. There were 3 things that really stood out to me. First, the format. So this is a short book. It's about 144 pages, and it's physically small too. It's kind of mini size. Kind of like the size of a greeting card, honestly. But what matters more than the length is how it's structured. So it's written intentionally for neurodivergent readers, and she lists this in the very beginning and the things that she did differently. So there are 41 chapters in this small book, but don't let that number scare you. Each chapter is no more than 2 pages. So each one focuses on a single specific idea. She has the key concepts bolded, and at the end of each chapter, she even gives shortcuts if you're overwhelmed and need to skip to the next practical session, because some things she's just more explaining concepts. As someone with ADHD, this was the easiest self-help book I've read in a long time, but honestly, probably ever. I didn't get bored. I didn't get distracted, which is pretty shocking for me. And I didn't have to flip back 3 chapters trying to remember what she said before. There were no acronyms to remember. There were no kind of complicated systems where you have to know this piece and this piece. And if you listen to January's episode on tiny habits, you know that that was not my experience with that one. Honestly, I wish more books were written this way. I would be curious. I don't fully believe in an absolutely neurotypical brain, but I would be curious to see if there were people where this format just didn't fit for them, if it was harder for them to read. I'd be intrigued. So the second thing that stood out to me was the lens about shame. So yes, this book is about cleaning and organizing, but underneath that, it's about expectations. It's about the hidden rules we carry about what our homes should look like, what we should be able to manage, and what that means about us if we can't. Now, I'm not in a season where I'm drowning, but I do have areas of my house that I feel like are revolving piles of clutter or tasks that I feel like I can just never get caught up on. And reading this made me aware of how quickly I slip into comparison. Comparison with other people, comparison with past versions of myself, especially before kids, and comparison with some invisible standard I can't even fully define. And that comparison feeds shame, and shame just keeps us down. We can't grow when we're in a shame cycle. Casey does a really good job normalizing that shame and offering practical ways to approach what she calls care tasks without tying them to your worth. It was really helpful to read how many things don't need to be perfect. They just need to be functional. And what is functional for one person and their living situation and their family in that life season is going to be different than other people. That was really helpful for me. And then the third thing that stood out was the trauma-informed lens that she has. And this is where, as a therapist, I really, really appreciated her work. So she weaves in trauma education. She talks about the ways that people's life experiences growing up, the standards that their family they grew up with could have, and the ways that trauma can affect how people are maintaining their living spaces. She talks about nervous systems and the things that can put us into panic and the things that can put us into shutdown. You know I'm going to love that. And she incorporates self-compassion and therapeutic principles in a way that feels grounded and accessible. She even gave some suggestions for online resources that I have added to my list to look into and to recommend. And she talked about self-compassion in ways that I'm going to be borrowing from her and using with my own clients. And I feel like that trauma-informed lens is often what's missing from not only like mainstream cleaning and organizing content, but honestly just like self-help and self-growth in general. Now, I do tend to read books from licensed professionals when I'm looking for areas to grow in, whether that be mostly professionally, but also personally. Not because other perspectives aren't valuable. I think people's memoirs and lived experiences and suggestions can be really valuable and really insightful. But I tend to not go to that first, and I tend to recommend that clients don't go to that first because lived experience alone doesn't always translate into something that generalizes well. A lot of popular systems or recommendations or things that have been life-changing for someone aren't usually trauma-informed. They're not neurodivergent informed, and that makes a huge difference. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with who feel like they're constantly failing at implementing some new system or keeping the system that they learned when they were younger, when really that system was never designed for how their brain works. It wasn't designed for their family, for their living situation. They have kept trying to fit themselves into a box that isn't meant for them, which again is going to continue to feed that shame cycle. This book was really trauma informed. It was neurodivergent informed. And she not only gave practical suggestions that helped her, but she generalized it in ways that could reach a lot of people and even gave suggestions about how to think about what would work for you if her suggestions didn't. Now, if I had one wish, it would be this. I would love to see Casey write a follow-up book for those of us who aren't drowning but want to thrive. A version that speaks to, personally, my nemesis, reorganizing the pantry. You know, the closet we keep the door closed to that we want to avoid because it's packed with stuff. The pile in the garage we pretend doesn't exist. The attic that we never fully look into because we've just shoved stuff up there, right? So speaking about how to tend to those tasks that people can be avoiding because they feel overwhelming, but from a growth perspective instead of survival mode. I really think she could corner the market on that. As far as dislikes, I honestly didn't have any. She does swear occasionally, but it felt authentic and emphatic, like she was emphasizing a point. It didn't really feel excessive or vulgar. So I guess that's it. So overall, this is a book I would absolutely recommend, especially if you're in a season of overwhelm or shame about your space. But I think that if you have just struggled with implementing some systems or have felt guilt about something, I think it could apply to you too. Now, I read the hardcover version, but I do think reading an ebook or following along with an audiobook would be just as easy. It's practical, it's compassionate, and it's accessible. That combination is pretty rare. So this one's going to be going on my office bookshelf, and I already have a list of clients in my mind that I'm going to be recommending it to. All right, let's talk about what we're reading next. For March, we're diving into Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This book recounts his experiences surviving Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust. So please be mindful if you're listening to the audiobook around little ears or just when you need to be in the right headspace to read the book. Now, I know that sounds heavy, and it is, but I also believe that there is profound wisdom and inspiration in the reflections of those who have endured unimaginable suffering. I think everyone can learn from that perspective. I also believe that every generation needs reminders of what humans are capable of, both in terms of harm and resilience. So we'll step into that together this month. So get your book, get comfy, let's get to reading. And I'll meet you back here at the end of March to reflect and discuss. See you soon.